Hello, my name is Solomon Wangwe. I'm the MD and founder of Goshen Acquisitions Limited, as well as its wholly owned subsidiary GrandAcres Limited. In this CTA classing session, I'm going to be sharing with you specific steps to take to safely and competently buy and invest in land in Kenya. There's so many reasons for why you should invest in land in Kenya. First of all, as a Kenyan, I feel one has a responsibility to own their country. We would have no country without its land. And, land is the base for everything, including our very existence, if you believe certain philosophies or teachings. But, I'd say that's the first one. The other is, if you're looking to build a sustainable, financially stable future for yourself and your heirs, your successors, you cannot ignore land. It's the beginning of everything. It's also the safest way to hold long-term wealth and pass it along to future generations. Also, historically in Kenya, land has performed better than any other asset class available. When you say that, what does that mean? That means if you compare returns on a cumulative year-on-year basis between, say, stocks and bonds,
crypto.
Well, I don't think crypto has been long enough to compare in the same way, from 1963 at least. But if you compare that to other ways to invest in land, nothing has performed better than land. Property investments, specifically on land, developed property tends to have, cyclicals up and down, but still cumulatively over time, it's been on an upward trajectory. And so, along with that, I would say, if you look at the basics of economics, I've shared this before, there's more human beings being born on a daily basis. Historically, we've never had as many human beings on this planet as we do today. And the land is not expanding or being created anymore. So on the basics of pure economics, it's a diminishing commodity. There's more of us requiring more space. That puts pressure on the use and desire for the land, which guarantees its future value, because more of us will be wanting it. So if you look at that and all the other reasons I mentioned, there's plenty of reasons to own land in Kenya. Of course, Kenya is a stunning country, beautiful for investment purposes, tourism, or even just for nostalgia. I know certain people who buy land just because of how it makes them feel, depending on where it's at. It's on the lakefront, it's on the beachfront. There's a million reasons why you should own land in Kenya. And
from a Goshen Acquisitions perspective, you've talked about it being an asset class that constantly is appreciating. Goshen has been in the industry for 10 years. Has that been the case with the land that you have bought?
1,000,000%, yes.
What kind of returns would you say that has shown?
Generally, the longer you hold land, the greater gains you will realize. Even if you're not selling, just in terms of value growth and appreciation, the longer you hold, the better off you do. For instance, for us, I think the most dramatic one would be Konza, where we're still holding a 10-acre block of land. We purchased back then, I think, for about 320,000 shillings an acre. And today, people are paying north of 4 million shillings an acre.
Ooh.
So if you look at that sort of return over 10 years,
10x.
yeah, it's 12 plus, 13, 14 times.
And with the development that's happening in Konza, that is guaranteed to constantly shoot up.
Absolutely. So, you compare that with other asset classes, it's difficult to beat because it's also passive. We haven't done a single thing to the piece of land. We simply bought it and we've been holding its title. So other asset classes also might require a bit more involvement, further effort from you after you've made the investment. depending on what exactly it is. But when you look at passive income or value growth opportunities, it's virtually impossible to compete with land.
Okay, is that where the phrase land banking comes from?
Yes, so land banking traditionally was a term reserved for governmental intervention and activities around controlling land ownership for future use. I believe this probably started in Europe, likely in the UK or Great Britain, where governments would project future use and demand for land based on population growth, rural-urban migration trends, and economic trends and the likes, and they would hive off reserves of land to allow for settlements to expand.
Ooh, okay.
Over time, that has become used by people in the industry like us, or just people on the streets, to signify or to mean that you're putting your long-term savings, stockpiles of cash, into land as opposed to holding it in cash, right? And there's many reasons for that. Again, over time, land generally appreciates because it's a diminishing commodity. If you buy in the right location at the right time, your spikes in value can be very dramatic, right? And then if you throw in assessments of inflation in terms of currency, if you're going to hold 1 million shillings over 20 years, that 1 million shillings 20 years later is going to buy you way less than it would have bought you 20 years ago.
True.
Whereas if you converted the 1 million shillings into a piece of land over 20 years, not only have you shielded yourself from the inflationary effects of the devaluation of the cash and what it can do for you, it's also increased in value. In many cases, superseding the inflation ratio. So it's a synonymous term for banking your cash in land holdings for the long term.
Just before we get into the details of how to go about acquiring a piece of land, I just would like to hear from you, who should then buy land in Kenya?
Who should buy?
Yeah.
I mean, for starters, Kenyans should be buying land in Kenya. If you're a Kenyan citizen by birth or by, naturalization, why wouldn't you own a piece of your own country? I'm a bit extremist in this regard, but I find there's something very unpatriotic about being Kenyan and not owning a piece of Kenya. So what makes you Kenyan at the end of the day?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ouch.
I mean, look at our history. Colonization was centered all around land.
It's true.
Land control and ownership. And even when it was given back to us on paper, in many instances, in reality, on the basis of law, the land in many parts of the country is still owned by foreigners.
It's true.
So, if you're a Kenyan citizen, you ought to own a piece of Kenya. I get it. Some of us are fortunate enough to inherit land from our forefathers, our parents, our grandparents, and so on. But not everyone has that opportunity. And even if you did, I feel there's a sacred responsibility by each and every one of us to add to that ownership, as opposed to waiting for it to get handed down. But like I said, I'm a bit extremist about that view on who should own land, but that's a beginning. Anyone looking to invest in Kenya, at some point will have to own the land. Yes, you could get away with leasing land and using it for a particular period of time for what you require, but I believe at some point, as your capital exposure increases, your risk goes up. Therefore, your inability to claim ownership to the piece of land that you've based your production on becomes a problem.
Yep.
So you have to own the land. And we see this happening in urban parts of Kenya. Nairobi is a prime example. It's the one everyone understands. Parts of the coast, Malindi is mostly Italian, at least as far as the desirable commercial beach frontages are concerned. There are certain parts of Malindi where you find signage in Italian, Same thing is happening in Nairobi now, places like Kilimani, where you have road signs and all manner of signages in Chinese. What does that tell you? People are possessing the land. If you don't own the land, the building you put up on it becomes a risk.
And I've seen cases like that happen. Let me ask this question just before we go into the next question, as a follow-up of who should own the land in Kenya.
Yeah.
Is it legal for foreigners, people who do not possess Kenyan ID or who are not Kenyans, to own land in Kenya?